If you've been following along on the podcast or the newsletter, which I highly suggest you subscribe to, you've noticed that I'm getting hotter and hotter on this idea of turning your property management company as like not the main thing that does the thing, but the driver of value as a real estate investor. And this is a third part in that research that I've been doing. And this one is with Nicholas Cook. Super sharp guy out of the Pacific Northwest. He originally wanted to be a real estate investor when he was younger, but didn't have the gray hairs to be trusted with people's money. So he built a property management company. He's become a highly skilled content creator, it just comes across very intelligently, communicates really well, is always well presented. And he has this vision for how he's going to create a overall fund that is going to be the next level thing that he does, instead of, worrying about this rat race of how many doors under management I have, how do I scale this thing, how do I sell this to some company I'm going to go work for. He's taking control of, his vision and making a world the way he sees it. I think it's particularly interesting for people that aren't in, exactly investor markets. It's how you make this stuff more affordable by fractionalizing it, turning it into a fund, raising funds, and offering it to a market instead of chasing the accidental landlord types or, like one-off small-time investors that don't really know what they're doing. Super interesting take on the future of things with Nicholas Cook. You're going to love this one. Oh, and if you notice something different about the audio here, it's because this was recorded live at Rentvine's Be Heard. So it's kind of like a live album of your favorite band, if I was your favorite band. Enjoy. Welcome to the Property Management Frame Breakers podcast. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez, and I am here to introduce you to the folks in the property management space that have broken the frame of what you may believe was possible. This podcast is presented by Vendoroo. It is your all-in-one AI solution for resolving your maintenance needs. Let's go. We were talking last night. Right? You're giving me your vision of how you're moving into like a more investor-facing kind of like content stream.
Yeah.
Tell me what you're building, man.
Yeah. So, right now what we're trying to do is really transform the business. We do a lot of third-party management. That's kind of the bread and butter. But as we've noticed the, regulatory environment being more intense, obviously there's been, always an importance of investing, but not only just for like growth for a team opportunity, but for retaining doors, because, when you've got, especially if you're doing multifamily, you'll do a lot of work, whether it's a lease up to stabilize or you'll reposition, basically a troubled asset. And then all of a sudden, the value's there, so it gets sold. And so it creates some challenges with somewhat client retention. But more importantly, when you put in all that work and the asset gets sold, we're losing out on the opportunity to participate in some of that value. And so since we're the ones who are doing really the hardest part at the end of the day, we are creating the systems and running the systems. I basically looked out and said, we need to move more in the ownership direction. We have some exposure to that, but it's really to, increase. We're really our focal point of that. And again, it goes back to, opportunities for employees, controlling our revenue stream. But also, again, especially for us, we're in a pretty, you'd call a litigious market. And so it's like, if we're going to have this exposure, which we do because, our owners, indemnify us for certain things, right? But there are certain things that can happen on our end that our insurance needs to cover. And the problem is that insurance companies are writing more and more exclusions as well. So when you start looking at the total landscape, you look like, what can I accomplish, over the next 10 years or even 5 years, really? It's kind of a no-brainer that, hey, we need to go on this. We need to move in this direction.
So I remember we were talking about it. I like the idea, like to me, I'm really hot on this idea of property managers really thinking like this, of like, how do you at the very least create a speed bump in the process before you go to like sell it off as a real estate agent? How do you try to assume the property and build a rental property portfolio? And to me, that's super important. I think what's really interesting to me is what you brought home for me yesterday, which is the idea that this is who you always wanted to be when you were 19 years old, but you didn't have the experience yet. And the idea that like you're taking your property management experience in order to provide the biggest amount of value in what is a complex real estate deal of buying and holding by being the best operator possible. To me is like a giant source of, that's a giant source of like what I would look for as an investor. I want somebody who has cut their teeth in as many different ways as possible so that it reduces my operator risk, because that's what I really, really care about.
So as you're approaching this idea of like building syndications and whatnot, how are you expressing that?
Yeah, so we're doing it in a couple of different ways. One is through client education and
Yeah.
helping them understand that there's broader opportunity. Because sometimes people, from the client side, they just think, well, I've got this one asset. Do I really have enough money to buy another asset? And it's like, well, you can do it in a fractional sense, and then you do have the opportunity to participate, and also to give them exposure into markets that are just beyond where we serve in our immediate, kind of footprint. Because a lot of our systems we can, transfer to other markets, not everything. And so there's going to be some things that are involved with that, but it depends on what your game plan is. If you're looking for cash flow, if you're looking for appreciation, depreciation, there's obviously opportunity zones that people can go into too. So there's a lot of different things you can do. So one is that. The other one is podcast. So we launched a podcast called Retire on Rentals. And we're going to be using that as a tool to help educate people on essentially how you can do that. And so that's been another thing. And then really just helping the team understand what our vision is and what the mission is, and giving them the confidence to do that. Because, when you think about it, you step back, it's like we have over 500,000 hours of time on task and property management collectively as a business.
Yeah.
So, we know what we're doing.
Talk to me about that piece, right? So that strikes at the kind of like the heart of where we have a lot of overlap in this content stream. And it's in the sense of I've recently uncovered, right? Like I think everybody knows that the world is becoming AI, right?
Yeah.
What I've recently uncovered is that the adoption of AI and your success with AI depends on your leadership and how you're able to lead through change. So when I hear what you're telling me about, I hear you thinking, I had a company that was, it was doing the same tasks, it was doing the same things, but through my leadership, I've been able to reorient what the goal of those tasks is, and I've been able to get them to buy into it.
Yeah.
Is that, am I warm there? Like, was that something that you had to kind of like, tell me how you approach that?
Yeah. Well, I think I've been fortunate in some sense in that there's not, when we hire people, we always hire people with the idea that they're going to have an opportunity to grow with the company. We want people that we can promote and develop over time. And so we look for that. We also look for people who have, reasonable behavioral flexibility, meaning they're willing to kind of step outside of their comfort zone. And so we try to build a culture of that. And we have some people who, are, very much open to these ideas, but I found, adopting it more recently, and we're always talking about it. There's a lot of support, but it definitely takes some focal points where you're having to get people to, feel comfortable with the idea. Like, what is it going to do? Is it going to replace my job? And really help them understand, like, no, this is actually going to unlock opportunity for you to do things that are more high value tasks, but also more fulfilling. Nobody likes generally doing tedious tasks. Some people do. There are those people. But, we want, especially as you learn more and you've been with, our company longer, what you have to offer in terms of value is knowledge, not
Context.
Necessarily. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to set you up to talk about the AI transition. And I appreciate you.
Sorry.
Okay. No. I appreciate you entertaining me. I'm just not trying to make this like a soundbite for me.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is, you've reoriented the goal of your company within your team to go from, hey, we're trying to grow a property management company, to we're trying to grow an investor focused like syndication company. Talk to me about the conversations that you had to have with your team in order to get buy-in and this kind of like change of direction, or did it feel like a change of direction?
Yeah, well, we had a kickoff meeting, about it, and we really had to kind of understand, what I had to communicate to everyone is, why are we doing this and how does it benefit them?
Yes.
And basically, I pointed out there's a lot of pain points we have in our business that are very difficult to solve. And that can range from, doing turnovers, right? Because when you've got third party and you've got a variety of assets, it's hard to be consistent with your turnover because you have different properties, you have different owner needs and different owner educational curves. So that causes a bottleneck. It's a constraint. The other thing too is like we have fiduciary obligation, to our clients. And if we're, obviously representing investors, we still have that type of obligation, but it's different because we're more in the driver's seat. Now we're basically, hey, we're here to, represent the asset to their wishes. But when we're in the driver's seat, we can make sure that we're running these properties with a long-term perspective, as opposed to, hey, how's this affect me this year? We're thinking, how does this impact the value of the asset in year 5, year 7, year 10, and beyond? So it addresses some concerns that we realized we cannot solve it in third party.
What I hear in what you just said, which is what I think is like key to leadership and key to change management, is that you, as a leader, came to a vision on your own based on something that's going to benefit the business and benefit you. But then when you communicated it, you didn't communicate this as like, this is what I need. It sounds like you communicated as like, hey, this is the idea and this is what's in it for you, right? And like you attach to this, like, how do we, I know that you're doing all this stuff and you have all this different kind of pain. If we become the owner, now some of that pain goes away. And then on top of that, like how this fits in is going to be much more fulfilling for you and you're going to be able to get into it, which I think is key to like a transitional change, is like, what's in it for you?
Sure, exactly. And I always say this, real estate is a team sport at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And, running property management is certainly a team sport. And so you have to have people understand why it's valuable for them.
Yeah.
And in reality, there should be a relationship there. It should be, if this is valuable for me as an owner, it should be valuable to the team as well, because otherwise, where's the incentive?
Totally. Too many. I feel like too many leaders are just like, hey, the company needs this, or or we don't make money or whatever, right? Like if you can frame this. So my biggest like experience with this was, I knew coming into like 2023 was a big year for my company.
Yeah.
And I knew that like the number one lever that I could pull is to get my team, which is remote, to really buy in on the idea that they can level up the business because they are good enough to level up the business. And if they do, it'll affect their life. Right. So hopped on a plane to the Philippines, and we had this whole, like, we had a 1.5 day workshop where it was really just kind of like, hey, how do we create vulnerability that leads to connection, that leads to trust, that leads to courage? And we went through this whole kind of like exercise of like literally that, getting them to buy in on this idea that they can level up, that there's nothing holding them back, and that their level up levels up the business, and the business leveling up is going to directly affect their lifestyle and the things that are good for them. And it's been the greatest investment I've ever made.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, and one of the things that, we're trying to tie it together is not only is from the standpoint of, okay, we can solve some of these pain points about, our workflows by going in this direction, and you have opportunities for promotion, which means obviously you can make more money and things like that. But we're also looking at it from the standpoint of, is once we get this to a stabilized standpoint, like some businesses where they're out there and saying, hey, you work for my company, I'm going to give you some stock or whatever. We're going to allow people to vest in ownership of some of these properties. So we're going to basically make investing and owning real estate accessible to the team, right? So
yeah, I love that, man. That's beautiful. Are there any legal hurdles for that? Like, you're essentially making them an LP, right? Or
I mean, basically, well, so with employees,
yeah.
Well, so we have to work out the mechanics of how that looks and like what the vesting schedule would look like.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some components to that.
Yeah.
But that's actually,
you got to skip like the accredited investor hurdle in order for them to participate in that, right?
Well, it's different because they're employees, right? So, but there are a lot of regulations on the syndication side. There's all the regulation. There's securities, right? And so there's some exemptions, and I obviously am not an attorney, so I can't go into the details of that. But there's some exemptions under Regulation D and so forth. And so we're going to be working with legal team to get that sorted out.
Yeah.
But that's a hurdle that we have to go through, and that's really, the hurdle is mainly just cost, but that can be incorporated into the deal structure. So
yeah, that's super interesting to me. Give me the thesis. Like, you were giving me the thesis yesterday, and it's a differentiated thesis of like extremely long-term buy and hold, right?
Yeah. I mean, so being in, real estate for almost 20 years and being on the management side and being an investor, one of the things that I see, causes people the most pain is really on the expense side, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes from their inability to confidently service the debt. And especially when you get into commercial assets where you don't have these 30-year fixed loans that you have 30 years to pay off.
Correct.
And so what I want to make sure we're doing is, number one, protecting the capital. But our vision is look, it's nice to, do a deal 3 to 5 years and turn and burn and make some good money.
Yeah.
But you're making decisions that are usually shorter term. You're not buying the same grade of asset. And at the end of the day, you're missing out on really the thing that you're creating when you do the hard work is the cash flow. So our belief is that, we want to hold these assets really forever. Now, there might be some we would sell. There's always the right time and right price. But the general premise is we want to build cash flowing assets that create generational wealth.
Yeah.
That's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And it's not exciting and sexy and IRR driven. Yeah. It's really kind of focused on the fundamentals of real estate. Yeah. And there's other operators out there doing this. So we're not like the only people who have thought of this, but I think people who have not run operations sometimes overlook this idea because they just hear about hold for 5 years and whatever, right? Exit. And so we're taking a more, long-term approach based on what we understand will give us competitive advantages. Because what's going to happen is our ability to buy and get into unique deals is going to compound as those cash flow streams build. So it's kind of like, the tortoise and the hare,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we're
yeah.
the tortoise. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I see it. Instead of, most syndications are looking deal to deal.
yeah,
You get to build a compounding advantage on deals and like capital and all these different things, right? Like they're always like, it's a two-end marketplace for all the DAOs. They got to raise the money and then they got to find the deal or find the deal and raise the money.
Yeah.
You get to kind of like build the floor of like where the capital is going to come from deal to deal that will continue to go up, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
yeah. And then the other thing too is like we're targeting a different, I guess you might say audience, right?
Yeah.
Because there are people who are like full-time real estate investors, and they're going to want the shorter time horizons because their opportunity cost is higher,
Yeah.
right? We're going to be looking at people that, generally speaking, would not normally invest in real estate because they don't have the time or the knowledge, and so we want people with longer horizons and people that this appeals to. And it's not going to be everybody, and that's fine. But there are so many people that have got into real estate projects and just got their face ripped off because the debt structure came due. A lot of assumptions didn't pan out. And all of a sudden, they're not only jeopardizing the project from a return standpoint, but the original principle, which is, a cardinal sin. So it's not something we want to have happen.
Yeah, totally, man. So I get as somebody that is in the single family home investment space, like, and looking to diversify and get another bigger deals like what you would do in a syndication.
Yeah.
I love the idea. Like for me, I think of my single family homes as like forever cash flowing machines.
I mean, that's what they can be.
That's what they can be, right? So like this idea of like being in a syndication at a lower entry point that I can continue to like compound and diversify the deals that I'm in and continue to build that cash flow over time makes a lot of sense to me. I guess the question that I would have if I was sharing, like if I was going into like a fractional thing and it had such a long-term time horizon, I guess there's got to be on-ramps and off-ramps of that like forever cash flow thing. How do you sort that out?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And so they're obviously within the operating agreement, there's going to be different terms for scenarios that happen in life.
Yeah.
If it's something that's really abrupt, it might mean you're going to take a haircut on something because it's abrupt. But otherwise, there'll be refinance events, right? Because the debt structure is something you're going to redo because the loan terms are going to be, that's not going to change. But we're not going to be in a vulnerable place where, there's a lot of people, again, they were borrowing at these low rates and then the rates jumped up and now they're underwater and now they got a fire sale or they do something. So our, standpoint is never putting the property in a position where the debt structure is going to upend it because it's just, when you get into that situation, you get desperate and then you have to start going to, mezz debt and they're going to charge you 20% plus. And then you just start, a slow death. And so there'll be, a refinance events essentially is really kind of.
So what I'm hearing is basically like while this creates a certain level of like, I got to get out my self risk because it's a longer time horizon, you are making up for that by the less risk of the overall deal that you are entering really going south for everybody because you are doing it this way. Is that kind of it?
Well, that's definitely a part of it for sure. But the other thing too is that, our first priority once we, get cash flows off the property, which we would be expecting that to happen when we close, that's first, that series of cash flow is going to be first and primary focused on paying back principal, right? Because once we get all of the principal back and the capital back to people, then their money's been returned to them. So now they're at less risk because they've got their original investment back. And then we can start focusing on retiring debt and then driving, the cash flow. But we want to protect people. We want to get that money back to them quickly. So whether that's through cash flows or a refinance event, we're going to be like, hey, we got your capital back. So really what you have in here is not a lot of risk, right? And so we're just going to build and compound on that. And people who have longer time horizons, that's great. But again, there'll be refinance events and there'll be potentially opportunities to liquidate as long as the regulations allow it and the operating agreement allow it. But things happen, people die, they get divorced. You got to have exit opportunities. So, they'll be there, but we're not going to jeopardize the project for one person.
I like it, man. I love the thesis. I think the real estate time horizon, the longer it gets, the sexier it gets. And it's all about like staying in the game and finding whether it is the organizational structure, the support structure, and like the legal way of doing it to like stay in the game as long as possible, I think is in the benefit of everybody.
It is. When you have equity, you have options, right? And we want to give, people as many options as possible. So.
Very cool.
I think the value prop of AI has officially changed. It used to be this idea of being more efficient, like higher quality of life and stuff like that. Now think about this. Vendoroo is now helping their clients put out these like one-pagers on the maintenance coordination done through AI, and here is how we express the value prop. 24/7, 5-star service. We are now starting to get these like responses, these interactions with residents, talking to the AI like, oh, hey, like my washer dryer is broken, but I'm at work and I won't be home till 10 o'clock. And the AI texting them back like, oh, that's no problem. I'll be here for you. And them just having this profound sense of gratitude of like, really, you're going to be there at 10:30 at night to help me troubleshoot my dryer because that's the only time I can do laundry because I'm, super busy all the time. Yeah. Imagine that. Imagine competing with somebody, right? There's an investor that wants to take his properties or her properties somewhere, and somebody is saying, yeah, cool, listen, we work 9 to 5, we troubleshoot 9 to 6, we have an after hours emergency line that goes to this like outside call center and blah, 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 blah. We'll take care of things in the morning and, maybe there's an extra charge on the weekends versus somebody that are like, yeah, we're on 24/7. You can call our AI receptionist at any moment if you're a resident and you're going to get a good response. It's going to help you troubleshoot. It's going to help you schedule things. You're going to feel heard at every hour of the night, every time on the weekend. And you can troubleshoot and be home whenever you need to try to fix something before having to send a vendor out. That's the new value prop. That's what Vendoroo is doing for folks right now. It's creating a competitive advantage. So if you don't have that competitive advantage, I suggest you give it a shot. Go to vendoroo.ai and check it out. That's vendoroo.ai. Schedule a demo. We'd love to show it to you.
Let's shoot some stuff for Rentvine real quick.
Sure.
What made you switch to Rentvine?
Yeah, so, there's a lot of reasons that we moved over to Rentvine. I mean, obviously, it looks kind of nice and shiny and things like that. But, for me, the founders of Rentvine had built property manager websites, and I'd been a customer of theirs for 10 years. And what I knew about them is that they were basically people of high character.
Yeah.
They cared about their clients, had exceptional customer service.
Yeah.
And even though it felt like a leap of faith to move software programs, because it's quite painful and it's very difficult,
sure.
I knew that at the end of the day, they would do the right thing. And, we weren't the first people to adopt them because we did want to see some miles on the program because it's hard to just put your business in the hands of somebody when it's really, really new.
You were an early majority, not early adopter, but early majority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I really went for it based on, the way that it looked, what our team said about it, because one of the things that they did that almost no other software programs were willing to do is they gave us a sandbox. So we had like a month to just play around with the program and, add fake tenants, add fake property and just see what was happening, which is fundamental because the problem with most software transfers is like you get in there and what you bought is not necessarily what they have.
Totally.
And that may not be the fault of the salesperson. It's just, property management is complex.
Yeah, that's interesting. Did you go to the roadmap thing today?
I did, yeah.
What'd you think of it? What's what's out of the roadmap? Feedback on the roadmap.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to see what they're doing. I mean, I think that it all makes sense. From my standpoint, their ability to, poll the customers and to, obviously be really responsive to feature requests has been great. I think for me, knowing that they've got a large amount of capital to execute on these things, I know it will happen. And I know it will be something that's happening sooner than later. To be honest, I don't spend a lot of personal time in Rentvine. My team does. But, some of the things like they are going to do for me, and it sounds kind of silly, but like the auto reconciliation is a major tool that I like. They have a diagnostic tool within the program already. That's phenomenal for just monitoring accounting issues. Yeah. But as they introduce more of the AI tools and, there are more companies that take advantage of the open API.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the stuff that gets me excited. The roadmap is like cool, but I didn't have anything that was specific other than the financial part.
Man, I get excited by the openness of their API, right? Like, I really do believe that Rentvine, the reason why we're here and the reason why I'm so all in on Rentvine is because of that POV. It's that idea of like, we're here to do what's best for the client. And the client is a property manager that's right now going through a giant transition moment in the history of time. And we're going to bring the best products to them, but we're also not going to stop them from like battle testing all the other best products that are out there.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that that's absolutely huge. Has your team, like, I know most of the time people come to like a user conference to like learn how to use it. You're not the user.
Sure.
Has your team reported back to you on any kind of like new tricks or things that they're learning to use?
I mean, there's definitely been some stuff that they've had insights into. And I think just getting out of the office and being able to focus on the product and kind of it opens up their mind to a more creative side of things.
Yeah.
And so I know that they've definitely had some takeaways. I've got some emails and some texts and things like that. And I think it's a great team building opportunity as well.
Yeah.
But overall, it's been good. I one thing I would probably say is that, I would like to see them, especially because this is a software focused conference where they have the opportunity to do this, which is to, basically say, hey, our program does this. Now we're going to show you how to do it step by step. Because it's great to be like, oh, you could build a dashboard. It's like, cool. Well, show me how to do that exactly, right? And then it may be something simple, but those like tactical like giveaways are actually super, super helpful. And like I got some of that in one of the, accounting presentations by Jimmy today, which was great. But, and maybe they do that in some of the other classes, but there are some where I think we could get a little bit more of that. But I know that the teams enjoy the conference. It's been very well done in terms of structure.
I think so.
So that, I don't have any complaints, and the food's been great too. So,
the food has been really good.
Yeah.
Like I'm not used to, in my people would call it sazon, right? Like when your food doesn't just taste bland like you normally get in many other places.
Sure.
And hotels are pretty bad with sazon, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's been legit here, right? Like it's had that like it's got the right salt point, the right. Anyways, I'm bro.
Me too.
Yeah,
that's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's good. I was gonna ask something. I lost my train of thought with this song, man. You just kind of gave a review of like first year to next year, right? Like, so the feedback. Oh, I got it.
Okay.
So you know what we did in Broker Owner? We had you weren't at Broker Owner, right?
No, I didn't book a hotel room, and I wasn't about to stay.
Well, you missed out on us dominating. But we had this like stands that like held the screen up here and had the computer down here, so that you could like kind of group demo the product.
Cool.
I think if they were to have like stations and like customer success people of like, hey, come to any of these stations, and people can like one person seeing how to do something can also be joined by like 10 people.
Yeah.
And that can be like a 24/7 operation.
No, that
while the breakout runs. That'd be that's an
excellent idea. Honestly, that's an excellent
Chris,
idea.
We're coming to you, bro.
All right.
Recommendation for anybody this is a first year conference. People thinking about coming next year, how to think about it. What would you say about it for like another property manager owner like yourself that's debating whether to come?
Well, I mean, if you are using Rentvine, then number one, you have to come to a conference that is built around the program that you use.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's benefit about conferences is, I mean, the curriculum's great, right? But people don't generally come to conferences for the curriculum. They come to meet the other users.
True.
And so it's like, I get to know other users who are using the program, and those relationships are going to take me back so that I can, call them, email them, say, hey, we're trying to do this. Are you doing this? And how did you do it? Or whatever it happens to be. So sometimes that component in and of itself is almost worth more. But then you're meeting great vendors too, and figuring out who the vendors are that have, either APIs that are
all
open,
in on Rentvine.
that are all in on Rentvine. And, again, it's one of those things that, we live and die by our vendors. We really do.
Yeah.
And so we want to have good relationships with them because, when we know somebody in person, we're going to give them more grace, but they're also going to give us more attention when we're like, hey, man, we're just reaching out.
Yeah. Relationships still move the world, even in tech.
100%. That's why people go to conferences.
Yeah. That's awesome, dude. Anything else?
I think we're good to go. Yeah. Thanks for chatting.
That's cool, bro.